Hey there, welcome to the Focus Podcast with Tara Lee. This is the place where we talk about real life, real relationships, and how to grow through it all. If you're looking for simple mindset shifts, better communication, and deeper connections, you're in the right spot. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the Focus Podcast. I'm Tara Lee, and I'm a marriage crisis coach. Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about what happens when your spouse pulls away, how the pursue-withdraw cycle keeps couples stuck, and whether one person can actually shift the dynamic in a struggling marriage. And today, I want to talk to a specific kind of person. Actually, I want to talk to the person who might be listening to this podcast while they're sitting in their car in the parking lot before going into work. This is the person who's got it all together everywhere else. The person who looks successful on the outside. The person who knows how to solve problems, how to lead teams, how to make hard decisions and get results. And yet when it comes to your marriage, you feel completely stuck. Maybe even lost. Maybe even like you're failing at the one thing that matters most. Because here's what I see all the time in my work. Some of the smartest, strongest, most capable people I coach are the very ones who feel the most disoriented, the most powerless when their marriage starts falling apart. Not because they don't care, not because they're not trying, but because they're trying to use the wrong skills for the kind of problems they're actually facing. So today we're going to talk about why high achievers often struggle so much in marriage crisis. What keeps them stuck, and what actually starts to move things forward. So let's get into it. Okay, let me paint you a picture here. You run a department at work, or you own a business, or you're a respected professional in your field. People come to you for answers. You're the one who handles the crisis. You're the one who makes the tough calls, who figures things out. At work, you're confident, competent, effective. But at home, you feel like you're drowning. Your spouse is distant, maybe even angry, maybe shut down completely. And no matter what you do, nothing seems to work. You've tried talking more, explaining yourself, apologizing, changing your behavior, giving space, not giving space. You've read the books, you've listened to the podcasts, maybe even gone to therapy. And yet here you are months or maybe even years later, and it still feels like your marriage is hanging by a thread. That gap between who you are everywhere else and who you feel like at home, that gap is excruciating because it doesn't make sense. If you can handle high pressure situations at work, if you can navigate complex problems with clients or colleagues, if you can build things, lead people, create results, then why can't you fix your own marriage? That's the question that keeps you up at 2 a.m. And if I'm being honest, it's probably the question that brought you to this podcast today. One of the hardest parts of marriage crisis for high achieving people is that it doesn't make sense. You're used to cause and effect. You're used to, if I do X, then Y happens. You're used to being able to analyze a problem or create a strategy, execute that strategy, and then get a result. And that's how you've succeeded in every other area of your life. But in your marriage right now, none of that is working. Your spouse pulls away and you think, okay, tell me what the problem is and I'll fix it. But when they can't or they won't articulate it clearly, you think, then I just need more information. I need more effort, more clarity, a better plan. And that makes complete sense. But here's what you need to understand. Marriage crisis is usually not a problem of intelligence. It's not usually a problem of not caring enough. And it's often not even a problem of not trying hard enough. It's a problem of emotional safety. It's a problem of nervous system reactivity. It's a problem of painful relationship patterns that logic alone cannot repair. Let me say that again because this is really important. Logic alone cannot repair a marriage in crisis. And that's incredibly disorienting for someone who has built their entire life on logic, strategy, and performance. So let's talk about the specific traits that help you succeed everywhere else and how those same traits can actually keep you stuck in your marriage. If you're decisive at work, you may become controlling at home when you're scared. If you're productive and efficient, you may start overfunctioning in the relationship, doing more than your share, carrying all the emotional weight, trying to manage everything. If you're strategic and analytical, you may start treating your spouse like a problem to solve rather than a person to connect with. If you're highly responsible, you may take on blame that isn't yours and exhaust yourself trying to fix something that actually requires both of you. If you're disciplined and goal-oriented, you may expect your efforts to produce quick, measurable results in your marriage, and when they don't, you panic. Let me give you a real-life example from my work. I had a client, we'll call him David, who ran a successful company. He was brilliant, strategic, disciplined. He could solve incredibly complex business problems. When his wife started pulling away, he did what he always did. He created a plan. He started tracking their interactions. He made notes about what worked and what didn't. He read relationship books and implemented strategies like they were business tactics. He approached his marriage like a project that needed to be managed. And do you know what happened? His wife felt more distant than ever because she didn't need to be managed. She needed to feel safe with him. She needed to feel like he could be present with her pain without trying to fix it, strategize it, or optimize it. But David didn't know how to do that because that's not a skill set most high achievers have been taught. When things feel out of control, the instinct is to do more, to push harder, to try harder, to work harder. And that's when scared effort starts to come out sideways. It comes out as pressure, as urgency, as intensity, as control, and what I call emotional management. And those things rarely create the kind of safety a hurting marriage actually needs. Okay, this next sentence is one I really want to drive home today. You cannot outperform emotional disconnection. Let me say it in a different way. You cannot win your spouse back with enough strategy. You cannot think your way out of relational pain if your thoughts are feeding panic. You cannot create closeness by making your spouse feel more pressure. A struggling marriage does not primarily need more impressive effort. It needs a better plan. It doesn't need you to prove yourself more. It needs a different kind of presence. It needs someone who knows how to slow the pattern down. Someone who can separate facts from fear, who can regulate their own nervous system before reacting, who can stay grounded when things feel uncertain. Someone who can stop making every moment of distance mean their marriage is over. That is a completely different skill set than what made you successful at work. And it's not one most people naturally know how to do, especially if you spent your entire life being rewarded for speed, decisiveness, control, and performance. Because what saves a marriage in crisis is often opposite of those things. It's slowness, it's patience, it's letting go of control. It's being instead of doing. And for a high achiever, that can feel like torture. I want to talk about something that doesn't get said nearly enough. One of the quietest forms of suffering in marriage crisis is this. High achieving people often feel deeply embarrassed that they can't fix this. You may look strong on the outside, leading teams, making decisions, handling major responsibility, but internally, you're unraveling. You're lying awake at night, replaying conversations. You're Googling how to save your marriage at 2 a.m. or ChatGPT. You're listening to podcasts in your car before you go to work, trying to find the answers that will finally make sense of this. And all the while, you're thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can I handle crisis at work, but not at home? Why does everyone else seem to have this figured out? Why am I so competent everywhere else, but I'm failing here? That shame can be really heavy, and it's often something high achievers carry because admitting you're struggling in your marriage can feel like admitting that you're weak. Admitting you need help can feel like admitting you're not as capable as everyone thinks you are. And for someone whose identity is built on being the person who has it all together, that can feel unbearable. But here's what I want you to hear. Struggling in your marriage does not mean you're failing. It does not mean you're weak. And it does not mean you are less capable than you thought. It means marriage crisis requires a kind of internal leadership that most people have never been taught. It's a different skill set. And not knowing that skill set doesn't make you incompetent. It just means you haven't learned it yet. So let's talk about what's actually keeping you stuck. Because if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I've tried everything, I want to kind of question that. You haven't tried everything. You've tried a lot of the same thing in different ways. So let me explain what I mean by that. Most high achievers in marriage crisis are stuck in what I call the effort trap. They think if I just try harder, it will work. If I just say the right thing, my spouse will hear me. If I just prove that I'm changing, they'll come back. If I just give them what they're asking for, things will get better. So they keep trying. They keep explaining. They keep pursuing. They keep working on themselves. They keep doing more. But here's the problem with that. If your spouse is already feeling overwhelmed, pressured, or emotionally unsafe, then more effort from you doesn't feel like love. It feels like intensity. And intensity doesn't create safety. It creates more distance. So you end up in this cycle. Your spouse pulls away. You panic and try harder. They feel more pressure and pull away further. You panic more and try even harder. And then they shut down completely. Then you feel helpless and confused and devastated. That's the pursue-withdraw cycle. And high achievers often stay stuck in it longer than other people because they're so good at effort. They can sustain high levels of trying for months or even years. They think, I just need to keep going. Eventually this will work. But it won't. Not if the fundamental dynamic has not changed. Not if you're still creating pressure instead of safety. Not if you're still treating your spouse like a problem to be solved. So what does help? The shift begins when you stop asking, how do I get my spouse to change? And start asking, how do I stop feeding the pattern that keeps us stuck? That is where the real power begins. Not power over your spouse, but power over yourself. Power over your own reactions, your own patterns, your own fear. That might look like not chasing every moment of distance, not forcing conversations before you're emotionally regulated, learning how to tolerate uncertainty without spiraling into catastrophic thinking, noticing when your trying is actually pressure in disguise, giving your spouse room to have their own process without making it mean they don't love you, being more grounded in who you are and how you want to show up, regardless of their response. This is what I mean when I talk about emotional safety. I don't mean pretending that everything's fine. I don't mean avoiding real issues. And I don't mean becoming passive or checking out. I mean becoming steadier, becoming safer, calmer, clearer. Because here's what I know from doing this work. People move towards safety. And when your energy changes, the relationship dynamic often changes too. Not always immediately, not always perfectly, but differently. Because you're no longer feeding the pattern that was keeping you stuck. This is why I believe coaching is so valuable, especially for people in marriage crisis who are used to figuring things out on their own. Because here's what happens. If you're highly capable, you can spend months or years consuming information and still stay stuck. You can understand concepts intellectually and still not know how to apply them in the moments that matter the most. You can know you shouldn't chase and still chase. You know you shouldn't spiral and still spiral. You can know you should be calm and still feel consumed by fear. Because knowing what to do and actually being able to do it in the heat of the moment are two completely different things. That's where support changes everything. Real support helps you see your patterns clearly when you're too close to the pain to see them yourself. Real support helps you stop making fear-based decisions that are quietly sabotaging your marriage. Real support helps you learn how to lead well in the middle of emotional chaos. Real support helps you stop wasting time, and I mean months or years of your life, on strategies that are actually making things worse. And for the right person, that can change everything. I've worked with clients who spent 2 years trying the same things over and over before they finally got support. And within weeks of working together, the entire dynamic started to shift. Not because they suddenly had new information, but because they finally had someone who could help them see what they couldn't see. Someone who could interpret the pattern when they were about to feed it again. Someone who could give them the exact tools they needed for the exact situation they were in. So here's the question I want you to sit with. How much longer are you willing to stay stuck? Not because you don't care, not because you're not trying, but because you're trying the same things in slightly different ways and hoping for different results. How much longer are you willing to live like this? Walking on eggshells, feeling anxious every time your spouse walks in the room, analyzing every interaction, every text, every look, trying to figure out if things are getting better or worse, lying awake at night, spinning in fear about what's going to happen, feeling successful everywhere else but completely powerless at home. Because here's what I know. You don't have to live like this, and you don't have to keep figuring this out alone. You just need the right support, the right framework, the right tools, and someone who can help you actually apply them in your specific situation. I want to share something personal with you. Years ago, before I became a coach, I was stuck in my own version of this. I was reactive. I was emotional. I was making meaning out of everything. If someone didn't respond to me the way that I expected, I would spiral. If someone seemed upset, I would immediately make it about me. And I would panic. I would over-explain, over-apologize, try to fix things that weren't even broken. And you know what happened? I created exactly what I was afraid of. People pulled away from me. Not because they didn't care, but because my fear was exhausting to be around. My intensity was overwhelming. My need for reassurance was constant, and it pushed people away. I remember one specific moment that changed everything. I had sent a long, emotional message to someone that I cared about deeply, and when they didn't respond right away, I spiraled. I sent another message, then another, each one more desperate than the last. And finally, they responded. They said, "I need you to stop. I need space to process what you said, but I can't do that when you keep adding more." And I was crushed, but I also got it. I realized in that moment that my fear was making everything worse, that my need to control the outcome was actually destroying the connection I was trying to save. That was my reckoning. That was when I started to learn what I now teach: how to separate facts from stories, how to regulate my nervous system before reacting, how to tolerate uncertainty without making it mean something catastrophic, and how to be steady instead of scared. And when I learned those skills, everything changed, not just in my marriage, in every relationship. Because peace began inside me first, and that changed the energy that I brought into every interaction. So let me tell you what makes my approach a little different. Because I know you've probably tried other things. Maybe you've been to marriage counseling. Maybe you've read all the books. Maybe you've listened to every podcast, watched every YouTube video, tried every strategy, and nothing has worked. Here's why my approach is different. I don't help you analyze your marriage to death. I don't help you understand every single nuance of what went wrong. I don't spend months exploring your childhood or your attachment style or your core wounds. All of that can be really helpful, but it's not what creates change when your marriage is in crisis. What creates change is learning how to regulate your nervous system in real time, learning how to separate facts from the catastrophic stories your fear is creating, learning how to stop feeding the pursue-withdraw cycle, learning how to create emotional safety instead of accidental pressure, learning how to be the steady, grounded leader your marriage needs, even when your spouse is pulling away. That's what I teach. And I teach it in a way that's practical, actionable, and designed specifically for high-achieving people who are used to getting results. Because I know you don't need more information. You need implementation. You need someone who can help you see your blind spots. You need someone who can interrupt the pattern when you're about to feed it again. You need someone who understands both the emotional dynamics and the practical strategies. And that's what I do. So here's what I want to say to you today. If you are smart, capable, successful, and stuck in your marriage right now, if you're the one carrying all the emotional weight, if your spouse is pulling away and nothing you're doing is working, if you know you need more than another podcast episode to finally shift this, I want to invite you to book a consultation call with me. I only have a couple spots left for new clients in my coaching programs right now, and I work best with people who are ready to stop spinning and start doing real work. Not people who want to be convinced that coaching works. Not people who want to keep gathering information. People who are ready to do something different. If that's you, this is the time. Because here's what I do know. You can spend the next 6 months doing what you've been doing, trying harder in the same ways, hoping something will magically change, reading more books, listening to more podcasts, searching for the answers that will finally make sense. Or you can get real support. You can get someone in your corner who can see what you can't see, who can help you stop wasting time on strategies that aren't working, who can give you the exact tools you need for the exact situation you're in, who can help you become the leader your marriage needs. The choice is yours, but I will tell you this. The people who reach out for support are the ones who actually change things. Not because they're stronger or smarter than anyone else, but because they're willing to admit they need help and they're willing to do the work. So here's what I want you to take with you today. If you're stuck in your marriage right now, that doesn't mean you're broken. It does not mean your marriage is hopeless. And it does not mean you need to try harder in the same ways you already have. It may simply mean you need a different set of tools and a different kind of support. If this episode feels like it was speaking directly to you, if you found yourself nodding along thinking, this is exactly what I'm going through, then I want you to take one step today. Book a consultation call. Let's talk about what's happening in your marriage, what's keeping it stuck, and what it would look like for you to lead this differently. The link is in the show notes, or you can find it at taralee.eddington.com. I currently have just 2 spots available for new clients. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start getting real support, let's talk. You don't have to keep carrying this alone. And you don't have to keep failing at the one thing that should come naturally. You just need the right support. Thank you for being here with me today. If this episode spoke to you, please like and share it and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And remember, what you focus on expands. I will see you next week. Thanks for hanging out with me today on the Focus Podcast. If something stood out or helped you in some way, feel free to share it or leave a quick review. It means a lot. Keep showing up, keep growing, and I'll catch you in the next episode.